Over the last year, I've been working on my game Retail Rampage, which is an arcade retail simulator built using the Unity engine. Progress on it is going well, but I've always had an issue with how the default lighting looks in Unity. And this is all down to my own lack of artistic vision. But no matter how many times I play with the shaders or tweak the lighting, I just cannot remove the default Unity look.
Nailed it.
Now, I'm no artist, and I'm sure anybody with an understanding of lighting and colour could rectify this issue by spending some time changing the settings and tweaking it until they found the look they wanted, but not me. So, I did the next best thing. I moved my entire project to Unreal Engine.
Just how stupid are you?
Working in Unreal Engine is always something that's appealed to me. No matter how many projects I've worked on in the past, the pull of the engine draws me back in. I'm not exactly sure why. My knowledge of C++ isn't great, and I'm even worse with blueprints. But when I open a fresh project and drop in some assets, I immediately get the sense that amazing projects could be built in this engine. And this is not to take anything away from Unity, it's also a very powerful engine, and some amazing games have been built using it. But over Christmas, I challenged myself to use Unreal and recreate the current project I had in Unity to determine whether I could get it into a state where I would decide whether or not it would be worth continuing its development in Unreal. And yeah, it was something. At the beginning of development, I found myself writing out each core piece of functionality and the pseudocode which made it work. That made it easier to lay out how I was going to implement it in Unreal. Things like spawning customers, picking up objects, and adding highlighting to items took no time at all to implement. The issue started to occur when I needed to add more complicated functionality, such as the dialogue system, the gold system which act as small quests in the game, and the customer and employee behaviours. I have used Unreal before in the past, but I'm not an expert with it. So although I tried my best to implement best coding practices wherever I could, I found I was never 100% sure how something worked in Unreal. Even small things such as getting the customer to move to a location. In Unity, you just set the transform for the object to be equal to the object you want them to move to. And in Unreal, it's mostly the same, but the syntax is slightly different. So I found I was spending a lot of time Googling how to implement basic functionality to my characters. And this is when I decided to enlist the help of Google Gemini. I had subscribed to an offer over Christmas which provided a month of Google AI Pro for free, and this was the perfect time to put it to the test. The first thing I did was add an extremely long prompt describing how I want the LLM to behave. Basically, I wanted a peer programmer to guide me on the best way to implement code and suggest appropriate changes when I paste in my own code. As soon as I asked it to break down the best way to implement customer behavior in my store with my desired functionality, it broke open its canvas mode and started creating all the code for me. And this is how I fell into its trap. For anyone who doesn't know, the Gemini canvas basically stores all of the code it creates as files, so it has a reference to what's been done before. Given that I wasn't sure if any of this code would actually work, I didn't bother typing it in manually. I just copied the code directly and pasted it straight into the IDE. And to my surprise, it worked more or less as good as I wanted it to. I needed to prompt it some more to make a few tweaks, but within minutes, I had fully recreated the customer NPC functionality I spent so long building in Unity. So with this newfound excitement at hand, I spent the next 2 weeks following the same structure I had for the customer behavior. I prompted Gemini to create the rest of the code for what I needed, and I was constantly shocked by the results. The fact that it held all of this code in files to reference at any point was surreal to me. If I asked a question about why code was implemented or if a different implementation would be better, it would refer back to the files maintained in its memory and tell me exactly why my way was stupid.
What the fuck?
But as the project was growing bigger and bigger, I stopped questioning why the code I was getting worked and started simply copying it into my project. Sometime near the end of development, I realized I had absolutely no clue how anything worked. For reference, I was using Ink in my Unity project, which was a great tool for setting up conversations in Unity. It's also available for Unreal, so I asked Gemini if I should continue with this here as well or switch to something a bit more native, and it did suggest that I should use widgets with data assets instead. I did manage to get this working, but it was not without its headaches. But at this point in development, it had taken me 2 weeks to get to the same point it took me a full year in Unity. But everything I built in Unity was painstakingly put together by me through trial and error. I understand all the mechanics I had implemented and still knew where to reference any functionality which I'd received help with from YouTube. Looking through the code, I remember writing most of it, so if I need to change anything, I'd simply go back there and change it. But with Unreal, I had no clue how anything was implemented. The scripts were long, and although they had comments, I was constantly searching through them to find out where a particular piece of code was. Or I'd ask Gemini where it was, and it felt like it was just holding me back. And don't get me wrong, I don't think we shouldn't use AI. In fact, I'll probably be using it a lot more going forward. It knows best practices and uses them whenever possible, especially when I have an error, but you need to know how to use it effectively. My problem is that I just don't understand Unreal Engine as much as I understand Unity, and I don't want to have to ask Gemini a question every single time I want to implement something. So I'll be leaving the project where it is for now and reverting back to my Unity project. I think AI is incredibly powerful, and I know some people have an issue with it, but I genuinely believe that with enough understanding, we can work alongside the LLMs to the same effect as we would with a peer programmer. Look, it's an interesting discussion, one I'd love to open up in the comments, so if you have any opinion on the matter, feel free to leave it in a comment below. Or if anyone has any questions they'd like answered, you can leave them below as well. If there's any interesting ones, I'll pick one, do a short on it with my opinion, and I think it'd be a great way to open the discussion on using LLMs in your projects. But in the meantime, I'm switching back to Unity, and I'll be using the LLM in my project whenever I feel stuck, and hopefully it'll save me hours and hours of browsing dead forums, meaning I might finally release a commercial game that I can be proud of. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.